Welcome back to The Piping Pastor. I'm your host, Bill Atkins. Today we'll be discussing the terrible privilege of choice through the poetry of Bradstreet, as well as some verses from both the book of Proverbs and Joshua. Well, hello again. Today I'm smoking a lovely mixture by Peter Stokkebye's Luxury Twist Flake, which is a delightful Virginia. It's rather light, so I've traded my normal cup of strong coffee for a lighter cup of Earl Grey tea. Pairing your tobacco with your beverage is rather important. You don't want one to overpower the other. It's rather like pairing wine and food. There's several different taste notes that you can enjoy and discern the more you practice, and then matching it with something, either as an after dinner smoke or as I normally do with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or some such is a great way to accentuate the flavors in the tobaccos that you've chosen. You may also notice that today I'm wearing a tie pin. It's not an accessory I make a great deal of use of, but they are helpful, especially when one wears a sweater vest such as this. It can be difficult to see the tie knot, and rather than try to do a great large Windsor with a knit tie, as I'm wearing here, it's easier to use a tie pin. It sets the color off so that I don't lose the tie behind the sweater, and it's small enough to where there's just a hint of gold, but it's not gaudy and ostentatious. So it's a lovely accessory to have and make use of. I typically don't wear them when I wear suits or when I have an ensemble together. It looks a bit much. I like to minimize jewelry whenever possible, and so I don't wear tie clips or tie pins or collar pins and such unless it's needful. So, but in these instances, they're a great accessory to have. So, by all means, pick one up for your wardrobe. Now today, we're going to be discussing what I refer to as the terrible privilege of choice. It is a benefit and a responsibility that we have as conscious beings, as those created in the image of God, that we can choose for ourselves which way we'd like to go. Now, of course, it is true that in many cases our choices are truncated by our circumstances, our socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and so on and so forth. I don't deny that a bit. But at the core of things, we have a choice when it comes to eternal matters, to matters of the spirit, matters of the soul, matters that are completely eternal to ourselves. Oftentimes in Christian circles, we refer to it as the battle of the flesh and the spirit. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. I chose this poem by Bradstreet for a couple of reasons. First, it really starkly points out the exact topic that is central to a lot of Christian thought, which is the battle between the flesh and the spirit. But also because just Bradstreet herself, a prolific writer, a wonderful poet, first poet published in New England, and of course, as a Puritan woman at that time, it's not exactly, equal rights and equal opportunities. So, just a very accomplished woman. And the fact that most of her poems were written for people in her immediate circle. She didn't write for the purpose of becoming famous or becoming rich. She wrote for those she loved. So in that, her poems have a really personal connection and a really personal motivation. So without further ado, this poem is written as a dialogue between basically her flesh and her spirit, and she situates this as a discussion between twin sisters. It begins this way. In secret place where once I stood, close by the banks of Lackland flood, I heard two sisters reason on things that are past and things to come. One flesh was called, who had her eye on worldly wealth and vanity, the other spirit, who did rear her thoughts into a higher sphere. So she sets this up as she's by the bank, and she hears this discussion between twin sisters, one called flesh and one called spirit. And then flesh begins kind of taunting spirit a little bit, saying, why are you just thinking about, lofty things that are beyond you? Are you really going to go live on the moon? Why do you think about that kind of stuff? What about the stuff here on Earth? And then she comes and she makes some really concrete examples here. Come, I'll show unto thy sense industry hath its recompense. What canst desire but thou mayest see true substance in variety? Dost honor like acquire the same to some immortal fame? Trophies to thy name erect, which wearing time shall ne'er deject. For riches dost thou long for sure? Behold enough of precious store. Earth hath more silver, pearls, and gold than all thy eyes can see or hands can hold. Affectest thou pleasure? Takest thy fill. Earth hath enough of what you will. So the flesh, the sister flesh, is making this argument. It's like, what is it around here that you want? You can have anything. And you see this argument, of course, made in the temptation of Christ when Christ goes into the wilderness and Satan comes up and offers the world to Christ. And it's the same kind of conversation here. And again, it's something that is depicted often in Christianity. And then you have here the spirit is the response. Be still, thou unregenerate part, disturb no more my settled heart. For what have I vowed, and so will do, thee as a foe till still pursue, and combat with thee will and must, until I see thee laid in the dust. Sisters we are, yea, twins we be, yet deadly feud twixt thee and me. And then she goes on to say, we are children of God, and so on and so forth, but we're not the same. I have my eyes on things above. I have chosen the things above. I have no interest in all these worldly things that you're trying to show me. She's given a choice between flesh and spirit, between worldly riches and spiritual reflection. And she, as the poet, takes the side of sister spirit, the twin sister spirit, that she is doing battle and laying her in the dust. So obviously that's Anne Bradstreet's view, of course. And I thought in this, it's a verse from Proverbs that makes a great deal of sense here. It's chapter 14, verse 12. And it says here, there's a way that seems right to a person, but its end is the way to death. Because you see, it's often depicted, and it's easy to look at the poem of Bradstreet and Temptation of Christ from 20,000 feet or from outside and say, of course, that's temptation. Obviously, you don't want to eat the whole chocolate cake, right? I talked a few weeks ago in one of the videos about the joy in restraint, right? And same thing here. But it's not quite that easy. Because it's not, the choice between two obvious options. It's the choice between something that looks good, tastes good, smells good, and from a worldly perspective is good. So do we choose that, or do we choose the things in the spirit? It's easy in a hypothetical sense. It's easy when we see it laid out by Bradstreet, but there's something subtle in her poem that I think we need to revisit. They're twin sisters, alike in almost every way, which means they see things at the same time, in the same way, in the same vein. There is not such a stark separation. So there has to be a conscious choice. The other book, or the other verse I was going to share with you today is Joshua 24:15. And for those of you who follow the Christian faith, you'll know that address. odds are you have it on some kind of placard in your home. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's not the whole of the verse, though. The verse begins, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of the Amorites, the gods in the land you now dwell, or the gods of your ancestors. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So basically what Joshua was saying in that verse is, look, I've done everything I can. I've given you all the instruction that I can give you. At the end of the day, you have to make a choice. And that's what this terrible privilege is. It's a privilege that we're given a choice, right? It's a privilege that we're not created as automatons, that we're not just robotic figures, because God desires a relationship with us. And it's no real relationship if the person is forced to love you, the person is forced to serve you. If someone chooses to love you, then it's real love. And that's the kind of desire, that's the kind of reconciled relationship that God desires. But that also means we can choose the bad way. And like the verse says in Proverbs, it can look good to start with. It seems right to us, but in the end it leads to death. And like in Bradstreet's poem, it's our twin. And our twin can sometimes make very good arguments. So while it's a privilege and it's something that we can choose life, and we can choose eternity, and we can choose all these good things, we can also very easily choose the bad things. And we can choose the path of destruction. Wide is the way that leads to destruction, and many there be that go down it. So don't discount the fact that you have choice. Don't revel in the fact that you have choice and leave some kind of hedonistic lifestyle, but consider the terrible privilege that it is. The second and third order effects of your decisions and what they lead to, what they can lead to. Don't let it paralyze you. It's like the Rush song says, those who decide not to choose still have made a choice. So you got to make a choice one way or the other. But think about it. Take some time and reflect. It's a privilege, but it can be a terrible privilege. Well, that's all we have for this week. So I'll see you next time. And until then, happy reading.